I'm sure you've noticed, a whole industry has built up around home sewing with the primary goal of selling us lots of stuff. Most businesses rely on shifting a large volume of products, so much of what's been designed for us is pretty bland and homogenous, including a lot of what comes out of the traditional publishing industry. However, some creators are sharing their sewing knowledge by creating really interesting products outside of the usual production and distribution methods. In this episode, I talked to zero-waste sewing expert Liz Haywood about her recent innovative project, a series of self-published zines that can be combined to form a book. We explore why creators might choose the DIY route, how you might go about it, and how it can be better for the planet. Hang on a few minutes and we'll get into this convo with Liz. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hi gorgeous listener, how is it going today? I hope your January isn't too much of a struggle. There's some wild and terrifying weather in lots of places, some horrendous political events and noise that must be affecting many of our moods, and lots of us are skint. I'm not sure what to say other than you're not alone, and if you ever feel like you are alone, you are not, because please know that my inbox is always open. So the setup of this week's episode is going to be a bit longer than usual, so I'm going to skip the usual sustainability wins this week. But I do want to say a huge thanks to Steph and Regina for signing up to support the podcast this week. And enormous thanks to existing patron Hannah for upping the amount of their support. I'm so grateful. Many people are definitely feeling the financial pinch, and the podcast has lost a number of patrons over the last few weeks for that reason. So I'm extra appreciative of those who have been able to financially support this work and keep the podcast afloat. So this week's episode explores a topic that we haven't touched on in quite this manner before, so I'm really excited. Our guest Liz Haywood is a true innovator, not only in the field of zero-waste pattern development, but also in creating published sewing material. I spoke to Liz way back when, which you can hear in episode 31, about her approach to zero-waste design and what led her there. So I started our conversation catching up on what she's been working on since we last spoke. Plus, I was really excited to hear about her involvement with Talco magazine, which is another publishing endeavour that is doing things differently in the sewing sphere. And then we get into the main topic of the episode, DIY publishing. Liz talks us through how she created her ingenious Zines to Book project and gives a pep talk for those thinking of producing something themselves. So is this the future of sewing publishing? Or at least can we hope and expect to see more interesting indie offerings coming through? I really hope so. There are definitely some super awesome books published and distributed in the usual way, including a growing number that encourage and promote a more sustainable approach to sewing, and I try to get lots of the authors of those books on the podcast. However, so much of what's coming through traditional publishing about sewing is arguably pretty dull and promotes the consumption of even more new products. And DIY books and products can be more sustainable also, especially when there's a read on screen or print at home option, both of which are way more sustainable than traditional publishing practices of books being produced in China and then shipped all over the world. It's also a way more accessible option for potential creators because there's no need to get a publishing deal and no need to get a traditional publisher to take a chance on a niche topic or take on an angle that might be viewed as political or anti-consumerist. So, interesting story. About 12 years ago, I was working with another sewer on a book proposal about refashioning existing garments. I can't remember all the details, but we had a publisher interested and there was lots of back and forth about what the book might look like and contain and how it might be promoted. The person at the publishers that we were working with, it was their job to pitch the idea to other higher-ups in their company for the project to be given the go-ahead. Anyway, ultimately the project was dropped and the book didn't go ahead. The reason they gave is that they couldn't work out how to promote such a book because usually their sewing books were put on display in craft stores next to lots of other products that you could buy to make the projects in the book. However, because ours was meant to be about using what already existed, the publishers didn't think that they'd be able to sell it to the craft retailers. Now, this was 12 years ago, and thankfully, at least in some parts of the publishing industry, things seem to have moved on a bit. So we're getting awesome books like Portia Laurie's The Refashion Wardrobe and Linnea Larson's Restyle and Restitch for Little Ones. Those books are now out there and inspiring and teaching people. But even if the mainstream publishing industry is now becoming more open to creating sewing titles that don't have to appeal to the lowest common denominator, it is really hard to get a publishing deal and get your work released in a quote-unquote proper book. And a book might not be the right format for what you have to share anyway. In this episode, we refer to the awesome little zines created by quilt legend Zach Foster, including the How to Deconstruct Jeans one he wrote with previous guest Ellie Hernandez. Those contain valuable information and are lovely things in their own right, but wouldn't be suited to being a book. Like the downloadable resources that I've produced that are available from the Check Your Thread website's shop, the How to Sew Clothes from Fabric Scraps one, for example. Lots of people have reported back that that's been really helpful to them, but if I'd had to get a publisher interested in making that into an entire book, it never would have happened, you know? All of which to say, I'm so excited about the possibilities of DIY publishing generally and in the sewing realm in particular, and I hope we get to see more and more. So sorry for that long drawn out setup. I just wanted to add some more context that might not have come through in the conversation. So until next week, when we'll be returning to the topic of mending for another episode, take care of yourselves and those around you. Maybe try and find some time to organise your sewing supplies so you can be reminded of what you already have. And enjoy. Alrighty, okay. Well, thank you again for coming back to talk to me for the podcast again. So the last time that we spoke, you told us about how you fell in love with zero waste pattern making and your commitment to producing only zero and minimal waste patterns going forward. You told us about how you develop your patterns and how you've managed to create your designs, including in such an impressively large size range. So that was episode 31. So if listeners haven't heard that episode, I do recommend they check that one out as well. So you were clearly never resting on your laurels and always pushing yourself and the entire concept of zero waste patterns, really. So we're going to be talking very shortly about your amazing new book, but I know that you've been getting up to loads of other stuff as well. So I'd love to hear what you've been up to since we last spoke.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Zoe. Yes, I've got lots to talk about and share.
You've got some new patterns out, I see, including a couple of collaborations as well.
I did. Maybe the past year and a half, I've been exploring zero waste hats. Hats are hard to do zero waste. They have to be in multiple sizes and there's a lot of round shapes that's quite hard to fit together. So I managed a sun hat with less than 5% waste, and the larger the size, the less the percentage of waste, which was an interesting thing I didn't expect.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, cool.
And a beanie. Zoe, they're the only two patterns I've done. Sorry.
You did you did a towel caftan and you did the one for Talco as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, the caftan was a collaboration with Nicole Okong. She was a finalist in the Great British Sewing Bee. I've been following her for a while.
Do you get to watch the Great British Sewing Bee over there?
You have to do something special to watch it, like join a streaming service or something.
Right.
I have seen a few bits. I see the highlights on Facebook.
But you haven't watched the full programmes?
No, they don't show it on TV here. Yeah,
Oh.
it's a pity, isn't it?
So you got in touch with Nicole, and how was...
She got in touch with me.
Okay.
And she'd gone on holidays to France, camping with her family, as you do, and made herself some nice things to wear, including a caftan made out of beach towels. Really great towels. They were sort of that velour-y kind in really great prints.
Very luxe.
Yeah. And people asked her for a pattern for it, and she asked me if I would do a zero waste pattern for it. And so she just gave me the measurements of the towels, like the size towel she used, and then let me work the rest out myself. So
she threw down the gauntlet and you picked it up.
Yes. Well, I knew she'd used a towel for the front and a towel for the back, and then she'd used part of a third towel for the sleeves and other bits, but then she'd got another towel as a contrast trim. But I fitted all the other pieces on a third towel, so it actually was zero waste on that towel.
Do the towels have to be the same dimensions initially?
All three towels, yes. But you don't have to use the same size towel as she was using.
Right.
You can rearrange things a bit. So I made a little video to go with that. What happens if your towel is bigger or smaller?
Super fun. It looks amazing. It looks really cool. And did I see that you made a version in kind of regular fabric as well?
Oh, yeah, I tested it in regular fabric first. Because you won't believe this, Zoe, beach towels are really hard to get here.
What?
Yeah, I know, Australia, right?
I thought you were like a wash with them.
Yeah, one would think. But we live inland, so we're not near the beach.
Right.
And it was the tail end of winter, so no one's going swimming much.
Right, okay.
Bizarrely, there's a surf shop in our country town, miles from the beach, but they only sold like premium rip curl towels, probably £50 each, 45 to £50 each, and I needed 3.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah. So, but I needed actual towels to try one in towels, and I wasn't sure what to do. And we didn't have 3 towels the same at home that I could cut up. And then Mr. H went to, we've got this variety shop called Cheapest Chips that just sells all sorts of things. And he came home with 3 fluffy white bath towels.
Oh, what a legend.
Yeah, so mine's got more of a day spa vibe.
Yeah, yours looks so nice.
It's very cosy. They're really fluffy towels, you know.
Nice. So how much of a challenge was it then creating that pattern? What did you come up against?
Well, I watched an Instagram reel on this caftan like 1,000 times. And it's been quite a while since I've made a pattern like that. So I'm trying to make a pattern from a sketch, pattern makers are. But I don't make patterns that way anymore with zero waste. With zero waste, the design develops as you make the pattern. But this was sort of going back to olden days where I had to look at it and then try and replicate it and then make it zero waste at the same time. But I was pleased to see that I hadn't lost it.
You still got it. So tell me about your dress your dress pattern that you made for Talco magazine. How did that come about? Because I was so excited to see your design in there. I love Talco magazine and we stock it at work, and it was so good to see that you were in there.
Well, I've been getting, probably like you, I've been reading that magazine from issue 1. I really like it, and I really wanted one of my patterns to be in there.
Did you? Did you approach them?
Yeah, there's a submission thing on their website, so you just do submission. Cool. And they have submission calls at certain times of the year for certain issues.
So did you submit the design, or did you just submit that you wanted to participate or you wanted to have a pattern in the magazine?
No, I made a pattern and I made a sample and photographed it. Actually, I submitted 2 things. I submitted a skirt and the dress. They took the dress and then I published the skirt myself later on.
Good. I'm glad that work wasn't wasted.
Well, here's a tip. If you're ever submitting things to magazines, is you can submit more than one thing and there's a greater likelihood that they'll pick at least one of the things that you've submitted.
Top tip. So did you know because every edition of Talco magazine has like a theme, doesn't it?
Yes.
So did you know in advance, were you working towards a specific theme?
Yes, it was the colour blue.
Right.
Yeah, so my take on it was that blue is conservative colour, and in the issue I was in, we were going into Northern Hemisphere winter, so we wanted like a conservative looking dress, long sleeve, high neck, that kind of thing. So that blue can be conservative in a good way.
Yeah, and it's got a really cool kind of wrap neck detail, hasn't it, like a tie?
It's just a strip that's looped and the unlooped end goes through it.
Really clever.
I must say it was a very, very positive experience. They were wonderful to work with.
Oh, amazing.
Designing a zero waste pattern for a magazine is a little bit different from designing it as a PDF, because you need to think about the logistics of putting the pattern pieces in the magazine. So their pattern pieces are on a pattern sheet tucked into a back cover flap of the magazine. But with zero waste patterns, the cutting layout is the pattern, but there isn't, and you need a different one for each size. But there's not room for 13 cutting layouts on those pattern sheets.
No.
So you have to think of a workaround, and in my case, I made a single large pattern piece which tessellated with itself, and so there was just one pattern piece on the sheet.
Very cool. So how were you able then to offer the range of sizing?
The pattern piece was graded. When I graded each size, I checked the tessellation again, because computer software that makes patterns is used to normal conventional pattern shapes, and it's quite hard to do zero waste patterns on a regular software because you have to do lots of workarounds because it's just not what it's designed for. My software in particular is not very good at all at grading tessellated pattern pieces because it guesses the wrong curves and then they need to be adjusted afterwards. And then I graded it to even more sizes when the copyright reverted to me and I published it.
Oh, fantastic. So did you have to do a lot of explaining to them? I mean, I know they're pretty progressive, but did they get your whole zero waste concept right from the beginning? Were they kind of excited to incorporate that into Talco and have that as an offering?
Oh, well, I wasn't the first zero waste pattern they ever had.
Right.
Birgitta Helmerson had a pattern in there, I think, before I did.
So they were on board with the whole concept?
Yes, it's totally their bag.
Oh, so yeah, because they have a very kind of sustainable kind of mindset, don't they?
Yes.
That's part of their whole kind of ethos. So how did you feel when you saw the photo shoot of the garment?
Oh, I liked it. I thought maybe it was the best photos they'd had yet.
Oh, amazing. And now you can buy it on your own website now as well?
Yes.
Awesome. Have you been wearing them yourself over winter?
I forgot to say, I've since made a coat version of that dress in denim.
Oh, cool.
There's a free update, actually, so if you have that pattern, there's now a coat version.
How is that different?
It's got wider sleeves and it's a bit roomier. Sorry, I have to tell you a story, which you may or may not put in this podcast.
Okay.
The one time, I've actually only worn the coat one time, and I wore it to get my tax done. I was very excited about this because I'm actually housebound with long COVID. I've had long COVID for 2.5 years, but I've been housebound since September last year. But I was actually quite excited to have an outing. Although I have to do a lot of planning for outings because a 1-hour excursion will just wipe out the next 2 days. So I'm quite selective.
Right.
But you can't avoid going to get your tax done. You know, I planned my outfit and I wore lipstick. And Mr. H said, I'll drive you. Like, so you've just got your energy for the appointment. You don't have to drive. And I got in the car and he said, you smell like an old lady. And I said, I know. My wardrobe smells like a deceased estate. Because in my wardrobe is all my going out clothes, but I don't go out anymore. And I stuck my head in there the other day and it just smells, I think it's just musty. I think it's nothing that coat hangers with clothes on put in the sunshine can't fix. You must get ventilation in your wardrobe just from opening the doors every day and taking out things and putting in things. But when it just sort of sits there, even though everything was clean when it was put away, it just gets that deceased estate, haven't cleared out the wardrobe smell. But the appointment went really great.
Oh, good. I hope you weren't too exhausted after it.
I got away with it. Not too badly. Not as bad as I thought.
Good. I don't think you should be able to use 3 days' worth of energy on taxis. That's not fair.
Yeah. I was very prepared for it, so planning is key.
So let's get into your Year of Zero Waste Sewing, which is your amazing new book. I've got it here. I love it. I've got a copy myself. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you released it as an instalment of zines over the span of 2 years, and then you've compiled it into a book which you've self-published. Is that right?
That's correct.
So can you give us a bit of a brief overview of what it's about, like who it's for and such, and why you wanted to write it?
Yes. A Year of Zero Waste Sewing, at its heart, it's really a pattern-making book, but not in a textbooky sort of way. It's more like pattern-making combined with sewing discussion and thinking about designing garments so they last longer, stories from zero-waste designers, and I collected questions for a year that I had heard people have about zero waste, so I attempted to answer them. And there's a pattern in some of the zines, and there's 5 altogether in the book.
So who did you have in mind when you were writing it?
I had in mind the adventurous home sewer, maybe people who like drafting their own patterns, maybe fashion students or graduates or anyone who wants to read more about zero waste.
Brilliant. I could definitely see it being really good for fashion students. It's kind of filling in a lot of the gaps of other things that might be out there, you know? Like, I love how you've kind of focused on various aspects of zero waste design that you've clearly spent so long thinking about and exploring yourself. For example, like the tessellation of shapes or the use of gathering or pleats and things like that. And then you've just kind of shared everything on that topic that you have kind of collated, and I feel that that's going to be so useful to people that are like, they've got questions and they don't know how to answer them. So I think that it's so clever that the way you've done that. So I could definitely see that being like a really good resource for design students, because I hope that more students do start to explore zero waste, and I hope they all get this book as well. I hope they get that into their hands.
I hope so too. I do hear from some students who are a little disappointed that their college didn't teach more about it. It takes time for new pattern cutting methods to sort of be used more.
Yeah, and curriculums
Yes.
on courses to change.
I can see the issue that colleges might have, because they need to train students for jobs they can get now, but they also need to train them for jobs that don't exist now that they could be having in the future. So I can see it might be a balance.
That's a lot to get into 3 years,
Yeah.
isn't it, I guess? So what inspired you to write it?
I sort of felt that I was ready to write another book, and I really wanted to, and I wanted to write more about zero waste, but I didn't have enough material for a whole book. But I thought maybe I could do it in instalments, and in that way I could get started and then the rest would just come to me later.
Oh, cool. So you didn't plan all the content in advance, you just kind of started?
No, I made it up as I went along, Zoe.
Oh, that's fascinating, because it seems so comprehensive. Like, as you say, you've got some of the little zines that include a pattern or include a project that you can make, and then there's other ones that like a deep dive into a certain bit thing. So that's so interesting. I thought that you'd kind of planned it out like that, but no, you just had to believe in yourself that you were going to come up with next month's content.
Well, I didn't release them each month. I released them kind of when they were ready.
Right, okay. So you took the pressure off yourself.
If anyone's listening who's got an idea, or they want to publish a book but they haven't got enough material like I did, this was just a pure joy to write, because it was just so low stress and low risk. And if I'm completely honest, with a book you see a huge investment of time before you see any return on it.
Absolutely.
But I didn't really have the resources to just go away and write a book, because I needed to keep my cash flow flowing. I didn't want to stop what I was also doing.
Sure. So what inspired the idea of the zines then? Like, were you inspired by a product or something that you'd seen elsewhere?
I just thought a little booklet might be nice. So it comes as you get 2 files. One is, if you want to leave it on your device, you can just read it on screen. And the other file prints out 3 pieces of paper on both sides, and then you fold it together and you've got a 12-page book. But I think most people did actually print it out.
Yeah, because I bet it's so pleasing to have that lovely little thing. It's so clever. Was the plan always to collate it at the end into one thing?
Yes, I had a 2-fold plan, actually. When I had done all the months, that they could become the signatures of a hand-bound book. And I made front and back matter. So if you wanted to, if you had ordered all the zines, you could hand-bind it into a book. Or you could wait until I turned it into the kind of book that you would buy in a bookshop. But they are very similar. I just changed a few fonts and tidied it up, because I wasn't always consistent with my fonts, because I wrote it over a period of time. Actually, Mr. H thought it should be called 2 years of zero waste sewing, because that's how long it took.
Yeah. Do you know if anyone has made a hand-bound version? Has anyone been in contact with you?
Some people have said they have, but I haven't actually seen the book. But I made one. I got a fresh set of zines printed off, and I made one for me and one for my teen, just to have. She wanted to hand bind a book, so I thought you may as well do mine.
Yeah. Oh, how pleasing. So who else was involved in the process of it? It obviously sounds like very much a DIY project that you tackled yourself, but I think, did you say you had an editor that was helping?
Well, I had 2 editors. I had a technical editor and a kind of proper book editor that goes grammar, punctuation, layout, that kind of thing.
Right.
They were both so nice. They were old school grammar, sentences, punctuation, and it was really, really worth it. I've heard advice about publishing books. It said, don't skimp on editing and don't skimp on the cover. And they are so right.
Brilliant. That's very good advice. And you did all the illustrations yourself?
Yes. And I discovered that I really enjoy writing and illustrating about stuff. I don't enjoy things like making YouTube videos as much as I do about writing and drawing.
Brilliant. So what was the process of writing it? Like you were saying, it sounds like it wasn't too stressful because you didn't put the pressure on yourself to have deadlines along the way. But was there any points that you were a bit like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to write about next? Or were there some of the gaps longer than you would have liked?
No, because I always felt that if I couldn't go any further than June or July, then that was okay. If there's one thing I've learned, it's ridiculous to put hard deadlines on yourself. I didn't feel pressured with this kind of way of publishing. So I set up a template for the booklet. So there's 12 A5 pages to fill. The front is the front cover, obviously. The back is my Zero Waste Agony Aunt column.
Which I love.
I collected questions for and answered them.
Did you put a call out for questions? Like, how did you find the questions?
I found the questions. I did a talk to some students in a fashion course and they asked me questions, so I saved some of those. And then sometimes I see on forums people discuss it and I can see, oh, here's a question I could use. And then two pages were devoted to a story from a zero waste designer. That was very fun. So I just cold called people, but some of them I already knew.
I was going to say, with the connections, was it like a great opportunity to connect with some people that you've maybe been following on Instagram and
yes,
things?
It was. And then, so they had to squeeze their story into 500 words and give me their logo, and that took care of 2 more pages, and that left 5 pages to put in whatever I wanted to put in. And if it was a pattern, 5 pages is a tight squeeze.
Yeah.
Because I like to do a lot of sizes and I needed to put the pattern information, the cutting and the sewing instructions in because I wanted them to be a standalone. If you just had the zine on a desert island, you could make it. And then as an extra, I made a YouTube video to go with it, like a sew-along.
Oh, for each one?
Each pattern, yes. Oh, except for one. Sorry, 4 out of the 5 have a sew-along.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So who did you contact then? Who were you excited to contact for the zero waste, like kind of highlights of the other designers?
Well, Chris Wood I hadn't really connected with from Chris Wood Sews, so that was really nice. I think there's one guy from in New York, Gregory Lagola. He doesn't move in the zero waste home sewing world. He's a evening wear designer who does zero waste, like the kind of gowns you might wear for dinner to the White House.
Right. And they're zero waste.
Yeah.
How did you come across him?
I met him on Instagram.
Of course. Have you kind of convinced him to release some sewing patterns?
I think he does amazing sort of one-off things. One of his gowns was won at the Oscars earlier this year.
Very cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Were any of the responses that you got back surprising?
Some people wrote stacks more than 500 words, so that was really interesting to read, but I had to cut it down.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about the book? Anything that you want us to know about it?
If you're thinking of publishing and you've got an idea, I highly recommend this way of publishing.
Cool.
It's very grassroots. It's very, very achievable.
I love how DIY it is. I absolutely love the format. I think it's so clever, and I do think you're right. I think it's something that is kind of underutilized because it reminds me of some of the little small printouts that Zach Foster, you know,
I've got one of his sitting
Zach
right here,
Foster.
actually. Yeah. The jeans mending one, I think it was.
Yeah, he did deconstructing jeans with Elu Hernandez, and he's done another one about shirts. And I think that's got a similar vibe, hasn't it? That kind of small DIY, Get it out there, print it on your home computer. You don't need to necessarily go to a copy shop, or you could read it on a screen. Really clever. I'd love it if more people produce things like that.
I would love that too.
It kind of almost reminds me of like the earlier days of the online sewing community where there were more DIY like patterns, people releasing things. And then, you know, it kind of became a bit more kind of formalized and, you know, the quality got better and stuff. But I think we lost some of that DIY energy a bit. And this really kind of reminds me that I hope that your work and the Zach Foster ones inspires more people to kind of share their ideas in this format because it's really exciting.
It is, and you don't need to put a lot in a zine because they're a couple of pages folded together.
So what program did you use to create it?
Well, I cranked up my antique computer. I used Paint Shop Pro 6 for my drawings. I draw them by hand and then I scan them in and then tidy them up in Paint Shop Pro 6, and then each one's cropped individually and numbered in the order they appear in the zine, and it's just easy to pop them into the text. And then for the actual zine, I used Scribus. Maybe it's a bit like Publisher, but it's been around so long, there's plenty of help on forums.
And that's where you created the layouts?
Yes. So, you know, I just set up a template and, you know, with margins and everything and kind of wrote to fit the space I had, which is a good discipline because it keeps your writing really tight. You need to say the maximum amount in the minimum amount of words. because you don't have heaps and heaps of space. So I think that's a good thing.
So you just need those 2 programs and you can get cracking.
Well, you might already have different programs. You probably have something on your computer that you can use.
Yeah.
Real early zines are like hand-drawn and photocopied and folded and passed around.
Yeah, you could do it entirely by hand, I guess, couldn't you? And then scan it and digitize it.
Oh, yes, you could. Yeah.
Turn it into a PDF. Yeah. Awesome. Would you do another project, or do you have an idea to do another project in this kind of format?
I'm writing another book, but I'm not writing it in this way because it doesn't lend itself to that kind of thing.
Sure, of course. Is it top secret, or can you give us a bit of a sneaky hint?
It's wide public knowledge. I'm surprised you don't already know about it.
Tell us.
It's a pattern grading. It's a grading book.
Oh, fascinating.
Which is a pretty niche kind of subject, and I don't think I'm going to make my millions with it, but I think I have something to say on the subject.
Because it was a topic that you covered in this one as well, wasn't it? Did you feel like you didn't have enough space? There's more to explore.
Not necessarily grading zero waste patterns.
Oh, okay.
But I will talk about that as well. But grading regular pattern shapes and other applications for pattern grading.
Interesting. So did you feel that there was a gap and that needed to be explored? There wasn't enough resources about that?
I think it's hard to get information on pattern grading from what I've seen. I never had a textbook. I was trained to do grading. I was a fashion student because pattern makers are.
Yeah.
And in Australia, the pattern making department does all the grading, and no one else any place I've worked at, everyone hated grading, but I didn't mind it. So I got to do lots and got quite practiced at it. And I also worked in made-to-measure places and had to grade patterns up to big sizes so that we could do fittings and make to measure. So I learned quite a lot about larger sizes in that way. But it wasn't until I really was making my own patterns and I felt more confident with zero waste that I could go with a really expanded size range.
Yeah. So do you see this book being used by students, by other kind of independent sewing pattern designers? Who's it for? Or who will it be for?
Those people you said.
Them?
Them. Yes, them.
And there's increasingly a large amount of people starting up their own pattern ranges, isn't there? There's thousands at this point.
It's quite a crowded scene. I think it could be hard to find your little spot in it.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best with that. So you're not giving yourself any deadlines, I'm guessing?
Well, from my past track record, I think it might take about 2 years.
So what's on your sewing table at the moment? Because I see you've been making some other people's zero waste sewing patterns recently as well.
Yes. Today I made Chris Wood's cinch belt.
Yeah.
It's a free pattern, and I just needed a belt for a dress, and I remembered she had this, and it's really easy to follow. And I've never made any of her patterns before, and I whipped up a couple this morning. I do like making other people's patterns a lot, but I don't need heaps of clothes. I wish I could do it more, but I got a wardrobe full of clothes.
I saw you made an amazing cardigan and some incredible trousers recently as well.
Yes, I made the Eccles cardigan by Empty Hanger Patterns.
It looked very cool. It didn't look zero waste at all. It was one of those designs that I was surprised to discover it was zero waste,
Yeah, it's a good pattern. I've been wearing that cardigan a lot. The trousers were from a new zero waste sewing book that's all in French, but due to the miracle of modern translation technology, it's very possible for anyone to use the book. And it's a book with 5 base patterns and lots of little hacks and tweaks that you can turn them into other things.
The trousers looked amazing.
They are great. They're fantastic.
Are they comfy?
Very comfortable, lovely fit. A lot of pattern pieces, you need to be super organised, but because it's got a lot of quite interesting design lines in it, but very satisfying so. And I've cut out a shirt out of the same material. The shirt's also in the book to make a 2-piece jumpsuit.
Oh, that would look cool. Brilliant. Well, I'll stick all of those in the show notes so people can explore them. So, Liz, where can people find you and your amazing new book?
My website is Liz Haywood, and it's haywood.com.au, and I'm on Instagram at Liz Haywood 3754.
And we can get your book through your website?
If you live in Australia, I post to Australian residents, but it's wildly expensive to send international mail in Australia, and it also takes a while, so it's much better to buy the book in your own country.
Right.
The distributor is Ingram, and you can order it from your local bookshop, or you could order it from an online bookseller in your country, or failing that, Amazon.
Yeah, we don't.
I didn't know whether to put that in on or not.
I might take that out. Brilliant. And of course, you can get the individual sections, can't you, via your Etsy shop if you want to get the individual bits and maybe hand bind it yourself. That'd be a fun project.
Yes, so the zines are still available. And I don't know did I mention the first one was free?
Oh, you did not mention that.
So January was free, and so people could see what I was about. And that's still available.
Nice. I'll put links to that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Liz. Thank you for staying up very late for me.
Thank you, Zoe. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!